Marci Surkes. Welcome to the CJN Daily.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's really great to meet you, and congratulations on leaving the Hill and starting a new chapter in your life. Very exciting and scary and all that.
All of the above. It's all of the above. I have all of the feelings going on at the moment, and trying to decipher which feeling I am feeling at any given time. But it's a big, certainly a big shift for me as somebody who's been going at a very hectic pace for a long time. Yeah, this is the beginning of the next chapter.
So, before we get into, breaking down some of the most important things that you've worked on, there's got to be a book in this, a tell-all book. But right now, I imagine, you're not telling any secrets. What are you going by?
No, I think I have certainly enough material for several volumes. There's no question about that. I don't know about tell all, but I am definitely interested in at some point having the opportunity to write about what I've experienced, because I actually think it's been a historic period for Canada, and I've been right at the center of it. So certainly lots to share at some point soon, but I will take a bit of a rest first before I get to typing anything.
Now, what is your family background in terms of Montreal? Like, is your dad a lawyer? Was your mother a lawyer? Holocaust survivor? What?
Neither of them are lawyers or Holocaust survivors. Both of my parents were born in Canada. My father's born in Montreal. He's a real estate broker. He runs, he has his own business. He does industrial real estate with my sister, and has my whole life. And my mother is a stay-at-home mother. She's from Moncton, New Brunswick originally. And she and my dad met when she came to Montreal to go to Concordia. And they have been married ever since. No formal correlation to politics at all, although they've become big fans of the Prime Minister and the other politicians I've worked for over the years. But
were they liberals though? I mean, Montreal Jews are always liberals, but
yeah, they're liberals. Yeah, they're liberals for sure. But I wouldn't say that I grew up with like a fervent partisan thing in the house. And I wasn't. I really wasn't a partisan until I started working on the Hill either. I voted liberal, and I have more of a liberal progressive outlook. But I didn't grow up like as a young liberal or anything like that. It wasn't from home. I was just always really interested in the process and in Hill stuff from the time I went on my grade 6 trip to Ottawa. I remember it. I remember the trip, and it had a deep meaning for me. And then I would say the going through the referendum was really the political awakening, I think, for so many of us, that seeing what can happen in the absence or in a vacuum of political leadership, and that really stayed with me, and that's what propelled me into it. It was nothing really from home specifically, and law. I studied law, but I've never practiced like the best lawyers. But it's really been the foundation of everything that I've done professionally. I would never have been able to be involved in legislating and statute and considerations around regulations and administrative review if I hadn't studied law. That's for sure.
You kind of walk on the shoulders or in the footsteps or maybe lead of Eddie Goldenberg, McGill Law grad, and Jean Chrétien's chief policy advisor, right? Have you met him?
Yeah, we've met numerous times, look, I think there's a great history of Jewish Canadians involved in our politics across the spectrum. I mean, at one point largely liberal, and now more diverse in terms of representation in different parties. And like I said, I actually think that's great. I think that's so important that all of the major parties have Jewish candidates, Jewish members of parliament, Jewish staff members, because all of that helps to shape the broader political dynamic, sort of regardless of whether you skew in Canada, sort of center right or pure centrist or center left. We're sort of all within a pretty, within a spectrum that's there's not, huge differences between the parties in terms of how we operate. There are slight differences and different priorities, that's for certain. But, we do work together across party lines in the House of Commons on a very regular basis. That might not be immediately obvious because it always looks like everybody is at each other's throats. It's not true. We get a lot done. We certainly got a lot done during COVID times all together. And I actually think a great moment for Parliament came just this past fall when members of all parties voted unanimously to ban the horrific practice of conversion therapy, targeting people for their sexual orientation and trying to force them into changing who they are. Truly draconian practice that's now been outlawed in Canada. Canada now at the forefront of that internationally. And it was a multi-party, all-party effort. So not just Jewish staffers, obviously, or Jewish members of Parliament, but it does go to show that having more diversity within all of those parties leads to great change, great outcomes for Canadians.
Right. Well, we'll look forward to the bill that will replace Bill C-10, and we'll see when that comes up. It's supposed to be in the first 100 days, but when the 100 days starts is always fraught with who decides when the 100 starts, right?
Yes, and in that case, like I said, there was a pretty broad consultation process, and a number of the participants had really good feedback, and I think the government is actually going to take a little more time to get it right. But it's at the top of the legislative agenda. Like it's just, I don't know if it'll meet 100 days, but it will be in the first part of the mandate for sure.
For people who don't know Canadian politics, which there are many people, I guess, who confuse different levels, whether the provinces are responsible, whatever. But you and I are both poli-sci majors. So a little primer, the PMO's office is really important in Canada. How many staff under you doing what while you were there?
Sure. So yeah, the Prime Minister's office, as you say, Ellen, it's really the nerve center of the government. It is dubbed the center by many as shorthand, and that is because in one way or another, every decision of the government flows through the office at some point. And that's not to say that everything is directed from the office, but the office and its counterpart on the public service side, the Privy Council office, we work very closely together to ensure that there is coordination across the whole of the federal system. So my role in the Prime Minister's office, if you imagine it being the nerve center, I was sort of at this intersection where all of the information about everything that's happening from a public policy perspective flowed through my shop, my team. There was myself, and I worked with a team of roughly 10 policy advisors and some administrative staff who were focused on ensuring that we know what was happening and helping to shape the direction and coordinate all of the public policy work across all of the ministers' offices, which are at the top of all of the departments of government. So it
was 10 out of how many? 10.
The Prime Minister's office itself is quite a bit larger than that. It fluctuates. It's about 100 people, give or take. And across the Prime Minister's office, there are different departments. There's communications, which deals with media, which deals with press releases, all kinds of statements, the Prime Minister's public appearances. There's an operations group, which in a non-COVID setting coordinates the tours of the Prime Minister, where he travels, where other ministers travel. There's less of that these days than there used to be. So that group has pivoted to new undertakings in the current environment. All these virtual kind of hangouts and greetings that the Prime Minister does across the country. So they're more focused now on the virtual space. You've got people who are issues managers, which is exactly as it sounds. People who are just permanently reactive and dealing with what is happening as it comes. No forward planning in that group. My group, which is by definition meant to be the part of the office that does have the ability to step back and plan and do that forward thinking. There's a policy component to that. And I would say, in fact, just to be really clear about the role that I was inhabiting, you've got public policy, but hand in hand, the title also includes cabinet affairs. And that's because the group also manages the agenda of the cabinet and the cabinet committee system. And that is a huge part of the work. So you're sort of managing the policy as it comes through, figuring out if we've got the policy right, if it meets the expectations of what the public is looking for, what the election mandate called for, and then working through the agenda, which may sound really trivial, but sequencing and timing is everything in life, and it is everything when it comes to managing an agenda for the federal cabinet. And so we were sort of the gatekeepers. I was the gatekeeper working with colleagues in the Privy Council office to ensure that the agenda was the right agenda at the right moment for the government to be able to execute on its goals.
That is a lot, and important that a Canadian Jewish woman is in charge of all this stuff. And then the legislation going forward, such as when to introduce, a bill that will maybe die on the order paper, such as the regulation of online hate, which happened last time. And so for the Jewish community looking at this stuff, there are, I imagine, one or two more other Jewish people in the PMO, but I only know of you and your executive assistant. How many others are there in there? Are you kind of the not the token, I don't mean it, but the representative senior Jewish voice there? Or do you not do that because you want to stay, objective? Terrible question, and I apologize for asking such a long question, but I think you know where I'm going.
Well, I'll cut to the chase on the latter part of the question. I mean, in terms of sheer numbers within the Prime Minister's office, again, things fluctuate because people move in and out. They can be by nature very transient jobs. Since I've been there over the last 2 years, I've probably worked with about half a dozen fellow Jewish colleagues. So it's not it's not a minion, but it's not nothing. But I would say, in terms of being Jewish within the Prime Minister's office, I certainly have not had an exclusive mandate to work on issues of concern to the Jewish community, but there is no issue of concern to the Jewish community that I was not brought into to be part of that conversation, to weigh in, to either run with if appropriate, or at least to gauge my opinion on, certainly.
Let's unpack that a little bit more, because this government has been, since the basically month of last May. What did you do to get the emergency summit on anti-Semitism set up? How much was you?
That's a really great tangible example. I certainly was involved in setting that up and working through the content and agenda for that summit, which I think was a really key moment for the community to interface with the government, and actually from what I actually really appreciated about that summit was, as I mentioned before, we have a special envoy for combating anti-Semitism, Holocaust remembrance, Irwin Cotler. His role, at least at the outset of his tenure in that role, really focused on the international dynamic, ensuring that Canada had the right voice at the international fora for Holocaust remembrance and combating anti-Semitism in Europe. But what I loved about the summit this summer, and I say loved because it's unfortunate that it's unfortunate that we are where we are, but in terms of our reality at home, the domestic issues that we are confronting in our communities, sort of refocusing his role at this moment on a domestic agenda, I think really coalesced at that summit. And government representatives had the opportunity to hear from Jewish community leadership from coast to coast to coast, from bigger communities and really small regional communities, about what they need to feel safe in their homes, what they're looking for from the government, and the type of leadership that the government should be undertaking. And I think it was a really important moment for all of those things, but most notably that I think the mandate for that special envoy role is now very clearly rooted at home in our home communities. And so for me, it was the community leadership from a number of different organizations began to approach approached me, approached other representatives of the government, different ministers, looking for a forum of that sort, because it was desperately needed. And I was positioned to be able to advise in favor of it taking place, and to help to ensure the Prime Minister was there, to ensure that the right ministers were there in that virtual room, and that the voices were heard, and that on the back end of that summit, that there would be follow through, and that work continues to this day. And there's considerable follow through on that, including the pledges at the Malmo conference this past fall. And you may have noticed just last week, the government has committed to writing a handbook to accompany to lend color and credence to the IHRA definition, and I think that is a really important step forward for all of us.
Can you tell us how this happened? I remember this so well. Friday afternoon, CJN announced there's going to be a summit. Then Irwin Cotler announced it on Twitter. Then Bardish Chagger announced it. And we're like, what? It's 4:00 on Friday. How did that happen? Why was it happen that way? And what was going on there?
I think the reality is that government is often dancing at multiple parties at the same time. And as I said earlier, sequencing is everything. And maybe in that instance, the timing wasn't exactly the right timing in terms of reaching the audience that the government was attempting to reach. But there's sort of no malice behind that. It's just when things come together and when the information is ripe and ready. And I think if I'm not mistaken in that instance, I think the government announcement was intended to come earlier, but wires got crossed or what have you. But again, I mean, certainly not for any ill reason. And the bottom line is the information got out and the summit took place. And I think was, like I said, a pretty crucial moment in terms of engagement and relationship building and continued work in partnership and allyship between the communities and the government.
Why was the government, and whether this was your decision or not, did they not invite to be part of it, but just to listen, Erin O'Toole and Jagmeet Singh and the other major leaders? That was a big sticking point for them at the time.
Yeah, you're right. So hold on. I think you're frozen, by the way, on my screen. There we go. Okay. I'll come back to it. Good. So in terms of inviting the leaders of the opposition, I think ultimately it was appropriate to have the opposition leaders there. My fervent view is that on issues of concern to the community, whether it is domestic issues or on Israel, that it is in everybody's best interest that it actually not be a partisan issue. I really think that the community benefits when representatives from all parties acknowledge and work together on these critical matters. So that's my personal view on those things. I hate to see Jewish issues be used as a political football. I think it is. I just don't think that serves any of us.
Speaking about that, you were mentioning that Jewish groups were lobbying you. My producer sent me a link to the lobbying page of the federal government's lobbying commission that watches these things. And the top of the list, the most number of people who had your name, most number of times that had your name lobbied was from the CJA Shimon Fogel, like 119 times in 1 year, this past year. I don't know if you're aware of that they put that in, right? You don't. Yes.
No, they put that in. No, I hadn't done the tally, but that's interesting.
Right. Way more than anybody group. There was one other Jewish person down there, was Eli Alboim on behalf of the Jewish Federation of Greater Vancouver. So are you the point person for Jewish lobbying in the PMO, or, because of your position? That seems like a lot.
I would say twofold. In terms of any issues that are registered as lobbying activities, that is because it's a policy matter that they are bringing forward to the government. And so in that instance, I think they're coming to me as the head of policy to the Prime Minister. The fact that I'm of the community and understand the issues that they are bringing forward as issues that are germane, is clearly one of the reasons why. I would say that, I meet with groups from all across the spectrum, and on myriad issues. But certainly I have worked with CJN very closely, and I worked with them exceptionally closely when I was at public safety, on renewing security infrastructure program and broadening that out. And that is, I think, a vital program of the federal government. Again, one that one would wish we would never have to be in the business of. But that being said, I know that it has been a vital service and lifeline for many congregations, community groups in the Jewish community, but not just in the Jewish community.
No, and I've covered it extensively, of course, the Muslim community, Christian community, Sikh community, any community that has, but most of the money has gone to Jewish groups as targets of hate crime.
As targets of hate crime, and frankly,
the risk of hate crimes too, not targets, risk.
That's right, at risk, and actually, and the Jewish community, and in that program in particular, CJN has been incredibly effective at bringing forward lessons learned and really good on the ground advice that the government has heeded where possible.
In PMO, when there's a lot of signs in the city on the election campaign that F Trudeau and throwing things at him. How is that for you to work in that environment? What's it like?
It's been really heavy. It's been really heavy. I won't sugarcoat it. It's so look, twofold. I mean, I've worked for a number of politicians over the years. I started working for Prime Minister Trudeau when he was then the leader of the third party opposite, when it was not clear at all that he would ever be Prime Minister or that I would ever be the executive director of policy in the Prime Minister's office. That was a very long ways away when I started working with him, actually, and taking him on a number of occasions to engage with the community in synagogues in Toronto, Montreal. I've worked with him for a very long time. I know him personally in, that we've been through lots together in terms of watching our kids grow up, going through all of the hoops to get from opposition into government, campaigns, good days, bad days, you name it. I would say, and I say this, I actually mean this as a nonpartisan statement. And I think that anyone who's worked in politics, who has supported somebody in elected life, will know this to be true, regardless of party. That people who put themselves forward in public life in this country are doing so in the interest of serving Canadians. I do believe that the Prime Minister has that at the core of what continues to motivate him. And if he didn't, I wouldn't have had the motivation to keep serving the way I have for all of these years. And so when you do see those public displays that are offensive, anything that equates with Nazism is certainly beyond the pale. But even the obscenities and the other sort of slang that's being used, it's to me it's hurtful, but it's also really I find it ill-informed. And I think it's unfortunate that the dialogue is descending in this way that we have seen in other countries. I think there is plenty of room for criticism. I welcome criticism. I worked in opposition for 9 years. We did nothing but criticize the government to great effect, and you find better solutions that way. I welcome critique, and I think that's a really healthy part of democracy. But I think that the manner in which some are choosing to express their discontent with the government or their discontent in the situation we find ourselves in is really unfortunate. And it is, I would say it's hard to watch. At the same time, it also gives you resolve. I take my lessons from this past weekend watching what unfolded on the Hill is that we must double down and not lose sight of our efforts to increase and expand the scope of training, diversity and inclusion, rapprochement between communities. I mean, that's the only way we're going to get through this.
You know the Prime Minister well. 2 things about him that you think would surprise our listeners.
Well, I'll give you one bit just in relation to Jewish community understanding, and then I'll give myself a minute to think about a second one. In terms of Jewish community, I don't know if everyone knows this or has heard him speak about it. He doesn't speak about it often, though he does. When he does, it's really quite moving. But he did travel. I guess it's probably about 5 or 6 years ago now, to Auschwitz, and he he continues to maintain a close friendship with Rabbi Shire from the Shar in Montreal, who I hope it's okay that I'm mentioning that, who was on that delegation along with survivors. And I think to this day, the Prime Minister thinks of Rabbi Shire as his rabbi and trusted confidant, and somebody who he turns to for wisdom and teaching and understanding. And I have really drawn great strength from that connection and that relationship. And I think it has been probably mutually beneficial. But I know that it's guided the PM, and he has turned it into a really deep understanding.
Does he study Talmud with him and Torah, or he just talks about faith in general?
Yeah, just general, more general. I wouldn't say that it's a studying type of relationship, but it's a friendship and an exchange of ideas. And I think that it has really grounded the PM in the Jewish Canadian experience, but in Jewish thought leadership, and the PM I know has really taken much from that relationship, as he has as well with his close and enduring friendship with Irwin Cotler. And so I think that he and I like to think I've taught him a thing or two as well along the way. But he's had great leaders, and he has great insight into the community. And when he speaks about the events at Colleyville, or when the Shar Shemayim was when there was a near attack last year, which was stopped, thankfully, thanks to the security cameras that the congregation put in place in partnership with the government of Canada. He speaks to it from a place of great understanding. And I think it's hard to communicate that in politics. And unless you actually have the opportunity to hear him speak at length, not on TV and little sound bites, but when he speaks at a congregation, when public things are easier to do again, or when he meets virtually, like he did last week with a group of survivors from Toronto, and you hear him speak about these issues, he's coming at it from a place of deep understanding and compassion.
What have you taught him? You said you taught him a thing or two. What have you taught him?
I'd like to think that I've taught him how to pronounce Hebrew words properly, with the appropriate at the end, so to speak. So if you ever watch any of his videos and you think, wow, he really knew how to say Chag Sameach, I will take credit for a little bit of that for a long time. I've worked with him on that over the years, coaching.
When Jenica Atwin became a liberal after tweeting that Israel was apartheid, how did you navigate that? Or that wasn't a part of it was above your pay grade?
I mean, it's not directly in my purview in terms of a responsibility. I'm not working for the Liberal Party, so obviously the party does recruitment of candidates. I will say only this: like I certainly understand the concerns that have been raised about her continued presence in caucus. She is working, has developed relationships with the Jewish members of our caucus, and is I think coming to a place of a better understanding of why the words that she used were not the right words. I think she has sort of said as much, and she continues to work with the caucus, but that's kind of a caucus matter. It's a little bit outside of my swim lane, if I'm being honest. So
fair enough. Speaking to somebody who's married to a swimmer, I get you. I know she swam across the lake. I'm a swimmer too. When the JCC is open, which it is today. Last bit. So you're teaching a course now. That's going to continue the rest of the semester, or was this a one-off thing? Like, what do you do now that you're no longer getting 8 million emails a day? 2 phones you have, not just one, right?
That's right. Actually, I had 3.
3 phones? Wow. What was it? I need to hear the red one from Moscow. No.
Yeah.
What were they?
Yeah. Moscow doesn't call.
I'm just kidding. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was carrying a secure phone for secure conversations, and then a regular work phone, and then a personal phone. So I walk around with 3 phones.
Did you have to give it back because you left now? They escort you off the hill. You got to put it in a box. Is that what happened? Pretty much.
Yeah, you turn it in. Yeah, it goes away. So I'm adjusting. I'm certainly adjusting. I like to say the way I've felt, particularly over the last 2 years in the Prime Minister's office, is that I've been living life in 15-minute intervals. Every 15 minutes, a different matter coming to my attention. Broad range, like I said off the top, in terms of the jurisdiction of the federal government. It could be any number of things, and then 15 minutes later, it'd be something totally opposite, and you need to turn your brain around real fast. So I'm certainly adjusting to it being a bit quieter. I am taking a sabbatical, so to speak. I'm taking a step back. The pace that I've been carrying on is a really hard pace to sustain for a long period of time. I happen to have 2 kids. Even if I didn't have 2 kids, the pace would be pretty hard to maintain in terms of working constantly, and even down moments or Friday night when it's Shabbat, and trying not to think of work. It's really hard not to. It's really hard to disconnect, and so I'm taking time to disconnect. I am a fellow at Carleton. I teach in the political management program there, and so I'm teaching on a number of subjects this semester, all related to my former day job. And I'm also doing some guest lectures. I'll be doing guest lectures with other master's programs at different universities this semester as well, in different areas of law and public policy. So I will have a few things. I will have a few ways of keeping myself occupied and engaging in education and in the policy space. I look forward to continuing to contribute to public policy and the public good. That is what drives me. It's what's always driven me. I ended up in politics by accident, but I think that politics as an avenue to be able to affect policy change is a tremendously important part of our democratic processes, and I've been lucky to do it for so long. But there is a moment where you need to recharge, get new ideas, let others with new ideas step forward, and so that's where I am right now. So it's definitely an adjustment, but it's not all quiet. I'm not retired just yet. I've got lots more to do.